On a foggy morning in late September 1944, near the French town of Arracourt, a German tank commander stood watching the mist clear from the rolling countryside of Lorraine. His Panther tank, a massive 45-ton machine, had been traveling through the night, leaving trails of diesel smoke in the cold air as it navigated muddy roads. He was part of a Panzer brigade deployed to stop the advancing American Third Army before they reached the German border. This commander had experience from the Eastern Front, where he'd witnessed what his Panther could accomplish in battle. The tank carried one of the most formidable anti-tank weapons available, a high-velocity gun capable of destroying enemy armor at extreme distances. Its sloped frontal armor provided exceptional protection, offering resistance equivalent to much thicker conventional plating. Against Soviet tanks, the Panther could engage and destroy targets at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. British Churchill tanks could be penetrated at distances where British guns posed no threat to German armor. Intelligence briefings had informed German crews that American forces relied primarily on Sherman tanks. These were described as adequate vehicles, certainly numerous, but fundamentally inferior to German armor. The Sherman mounted a medium-caliber gun, originally designed for infantry support rather than tank combat. Its armor protection was modest at best. German soldiers had developed dismissive nicknames for the Sherman, claiming it would catch fire from the first hit. In officer gatherings, there was a common understanding that while American tank crews demonstrated bravery, they operated inferior machines. German tactical wisdom suggested that one Panther could handle multiple Shermans if the crew maintained discipline and proper positioning. The Panther's gun could penetrate Sherman armor at 1,500 meters or more, while the Sherman's gun struggled to damage a Panther's frontal armor, even at point-blank range. The mathematics seemed straightforward. German engineering had created a superior weapon, but as the German commander surveyed the terrain ahead through his field glasses, he witnessed something that challenged everything he'd been taught about armored combat. In the valley below, American Sherman tanks were maneuvering in coordinated formations. They weren't charging forward in the straightforward assault he anticipated. Instead, they moved with clear purpose, utilizing terrain features, communicating seamlessly through radio coordination, and they were destroying Panthers systematically. 3 German tanks were already ablaze in the fields, the distinctive silhouettes of Panthers. Their long guns pointed at awkward angles, poured smoke from open hatches and engine compartments. The Americans weren't merely winning, they were winning rapidly, methodically, with a degree of tactical coordination that German crews, despite their superior equipment, seemed unable to counter. The Panther tanks' development stemmed from Germany's shocking encounter with Soviet armor on the Eastern Front when Germany launched its invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941. German tank crews felt confident in their existing vehicles. These tanks had proven themselves across Poland, France, and throughout Europe. But in the forests and fields of Russia, they encountered a revolutionary Soviet design that would force a complete rethinking of German tank development. This Soviet tank stunned German crews with its innovative features: sloped armor deflected shots that should have penetrated easily. Wide tracks provided mobility through mud and snow that German tanks couldn't match. Its powerful gun could destroy German tanks at ranges where German weapons were ineffective. Reports from the Eastern Front expressed alarm and sometimes disbelief. Soviet tank design had leapfrogged German engineering capabilities. The German leadership demanded an immediate response, ordering the development of a new medium tank capable of matching or exceeding Soviet capabilities. The design contract went to a major German engineering firm. The design team studied captured Soviet tanks extensively, measuring armor thickness, testing slope plate configurations, examining suspension systems and drivetrains. The resulting Panther incorporated the best lessons from Soviet design while maintaining German engineering precision. Frontal armor was sloped dramatically, making it extremely resistant to penetration. The main gun was a new high-velocity weapon with exceptional penetrating power at long range. This velocity translated directly into armor-piercing capability. The first Panthers emerged from production facilities in late 1942. By mid-1943, sufficient numbers had been built to equip entire battalions. The tank made its combat debut amid a massive armored clash on the Eastern Front. Despite mechanical problems plaguing early production models, the Panther's combat performance impressed German commanders. Its gun could destroy Soviet tanks at ranges Soviet crews found impossible to believe. Its armor resisted most Soviet anti-tank weapons. German propaganda seized on the Panther as proof of German technological superiority. Newsreels showed the tanks in action, their crews appearing confident and professional. The message was unmistakable. German engineering had produced the finest tank in the world. Even when facing numerical disadvantages, German quality would prevail. By late 1944, when Panthers began arriving on the Western Front to face American and British forces, German crews believed they possessed an overwhelming advantage. They had studied intelligence assessments of Allied armor. British tanks were described as slow and inadequately armed. American Shermans were characterized in German tactical manuals as second-rate designs, adequate for colonial operations, but unsuited for combat against modern German tanks. The Sherman's main gun had significantly lower muzzle velocity than the Panther's weapon. Its armor-piercing round could penetrate modest armor thickness at close range under ideal conditions. The Panther's frontal armor, with its slope providing effective thickness far exceeding this penetration capability, should have been invulnerable to frontal shots from Sherman tanks at any combat range. German crews were trained to exploit these advantages, engage at long range where the Panther's superior gun could destroy enemy tanks before they could effectively return fire, maintain frontal aspect toward the enemy to maximize armor protection, use the Panther's excellent optics to acquire targets quickly. The tactics made logical sense. The equipment supported them. Everything German crews had been taught suggested they would dominate any engagement with American armor. German confidence in the Panther extended beyond technical specifications. It was rooted in a broader belief system about German military superiority, about the importance of individual weapon quality over quantity, about the conviction that superior training and equipment would overcome numerical disadvantages. This wasn't merely propaganda, though propaganda reinforced it. It was a deeply held conviction among German officers and crew members who had seen their equipment perform well in combat. The Panther crew typically consisted of 5 men, working in coordinated roles. The commander occupied the turret with excellent all-around vision capability, equipped with periscopes, providing 360 degrees of observation. He could scan 4 targets, direct the driver, coordinate with other tanks via radio. Every Panther had radio equipment, unlike earlier German tanks, where only command vehicles carried radios. The gunner sat below and to the left of the commander, operating the main gun through a sophisticated telescopic sight with magnification capability. The sight provided excellent target resolution at long range. The gun was stabilized sufficiently that skilled gunners could achieve first-round hits at distances exceeding 1,000 meters. The loader, positioned to the gunner's right, had access to organized ammunition storage, holding numerous rounds of various types, including armor-piercing, high-explosive, and specialized rounds for different tactical situations. The driver sat in the forward hole on the left side with adequate vision through periscopes and a direct vision port. The radio operator and hull machine gunner occupied the right front position, operating a mounted machine gun and managing radio communications when the commander was occupied with other tasks. This crew configuration in the Panther significant combat advantages. The commander could focus entirely on tactical decisions and target acquisition. The gunner concentrated solely on accurate fire. The loader maintained a steady rate of fire without the commander needing to assist with loading and was required in some tank designs. This division of labor made the tank more effective than designs where crew Members had to perform multiple, simultaneous tasks. The Panther's armor protection was designed using lessons learned from years of tank combat. The frontal hull plate, thick and dramatically sloped, was nearly impossible to penetrate with most Allied anti-tank weapons at combat ranges. The turret front, even thicker with significant curvature, provided similar protection. Side armor was thinner, making flank shots dangerous, but German tactical doctrine emphasized maintaining frontal aspect toward the enemy whenever possible. The suspension system used an advanced design with numerous overlapping road wheels per side. This gave the tank excellent cross-country mobility and a relatively smooth ride for a vehicle of its weight. The powerful engine provided good top speed on roads and reasonable cross-country performance. German tank schools taught crews to maximize these advantages. Instructors emphasized long-range gunnery, teaching gunners to estimate range accurately and engage targets at distances where enemy tanks couldn't effectively return fire. They taught commanders to position their tanks using terrain, fighting from hold-down positions where only the turret was exposed, coordinating with other tanks in mutual support. The training was thorough, often taking months to produce a fully qualified crew. By 1944, with the war increasingly desperate for Germany, training time was being compressed, but the doctrine remained consistent. Use superior equipment and superior tactics to defeat numerically superior enemies. The Panther made this doctrine seem achievable on paper. In controlled conditions against opponents who fought the way German planners expected, Panthers should have dominated. When Panther-equipped units deployed to France in late summer 1944 to counter the Allied breakout from Normandy, crews were confident. They had the best tank Germany could produce. They had training emphasizing their vehicle's strengths. They had combat experience. Many transferred from Eastern Front units. They expected to stop the American advance, to inflict casualties that would make the Allies reconsider their offensive. The Sherman, they had been told, was inferior. Its gun couldn't penetrate their frontal armor. Its armor couldn't resist their gun. The mathematics supported German victory, but mathematics on paper and combat reality are fundamentally different things. And in the fields around Arracourt, American Sherman crews were about to demonstrate that superior equipment alone doesn't determine battle outcomes. The American tank crews approaching Arracourt in September 1944 were products of a fundamentally different training system than their German counterparts. They came from armored force training centers where the United States Army had spent 3 years refining doctrine specifically designed around the Sherman tank's actual capabilities rather than the tank the Army wished it had. One American tank commander had trained for 11 months before deploying to Europe. His training emphasized crew coordination above individual tank capability. The instructors had been brutally honest. The Sherman was not invincible. Its gun would struggle against the frontal armor of German heavy tanks. Its armor could be penetrated by German guns at ranges where American crews would have difficulty returning effective fire. But the training didn't stop at acknowledging limitations. It focused on exploiting advantages that didn't appear in technical specification sheets. The Sherman was mechanically reliable. Its drivetrain could operate to 400s of miles without major maintenance. Its tracks lasted thousands of miles compared to the hundreds typical of German tanks. The engine, originally designed for aircraft, ran smoothly on gasoline that American logistics could deliver in unlimited quantities to frontline units. American crews trained to fight in coordinated groups. Where German doctrine emphasized individual tank superiority, American doctrine emphasized coordination at higher organizational levels. Every Sherman had a radio, not 1 in 4 like some armies, not just command tanks like early German practice. Every single tank could communicate with every other tank in its unit and with supporting infantry, artillery, and air assets. The training drilled this coordination constantly. Tank commanders practiced calling for artillery fire on targets they couldn't engage directly. They practiced coordinating movement with other tanks to achieve flank shots on enemy armor. They practiced rapid-fire techniques, with loaders trained to maintain rates of fire exceeding what German crews could achieve despite having similar loading procedures. The loader's position in a Sherman was carefully designed. The turret basket beneath the gun rotated with the turret, giving the loader a stable platform to work from regardless of turret position. Ammunition storage was positioned for easy access. The rounds could be grabbed, loaded, and the breech closed in a smooth motion that well-trained crews performed in under 6 seconds. German Panthers had similar loading times, but American crews trained more consistently with more ammunition available for practice. American gunnery training emphasized rapid engagement at medium ranges rather than precision shots at extreme distances. Instructors taught gunners to hit targets at medium ranges quickly and reliably rather than attempting difficult shots at extreme distance. The philosophy was simple: get close enough that your gun is effective. Use coordination and speed to prevent the enemy from using their range advantage, and fire faster than they can. The Sherman's gun, while less powerful than the Panther's weapon, had advantages that technical specifications didn't capture. A mechanical stabilization system kept the gun relatively stable even when the tank was moving, allowing Shermans to fire accurately on the move. German tanks, including the Panther, had to stop to fire accurately. In fluid combat situations, this meant Shermans could engage targets while maneuvering, while German tanks had to pause, exposing themselves to fire. The Sherman's gun fired various ammunition types. The standard armor-piercing round could penetrate moderate armor thickness at close range. This was insufficient to penetrate a Panther's frontal armor, but it could penetrate side armor, turret sides, and rear armor with ease. American tactical doctrine focused on achieving these flank shots through coordinated movement. High explosive rounds gave Shermans excellent capability against infantry, fortifications, and soft targets. Mixed ammunition loads meant Sherman crews could engage various targets without needing to change weapons or call for support. American logistics ensured that every tank had full ammunition load and adequate fuel. Supply columns followed advancing units with fuel trucks, ammunition trucks, and maintenance vehicles. When a Sherman suffered mechanical failure, recovery vehicles towed it back to maintenance units that had spare parts available. The entire system was designed to keep the maximum number of tanks operational at all times. Within minutes of engagement at Arracourt, the German formation was in disarray. Panthers that had seemed invulnerable when presenting their frontal armor were burning when caught from the side. German radio discipline broke down as commanders tried to direct their tanks to face multiple threats from multiple directions. Some crews, realizing they were outmaneuvered, attempted to withdraw, but the Panther's mechanical complexity became a liability, several Panthers attempting to reverse at speed through tracks. The overlapping road wheel design, which gave excellent cross-country performance when functioning properly, became a death trap when damaged. A single thrown track immobilized the tank completely. Crews had to bail out or be destroyed by American tanks that quickly engaged disabled vehicles. American crews discovered something that German crews had known, but American intelligence hadn't fully appreciated. The Panther was mechanically fragile. Final drive failures were common, particularly when tanks maneuvered aggressively in reverse. The complex transmission could fail under stress. The overlapping road wheels packed with mud, and in wet conditions, mud could freeze overnight, locking the wheels and making the tank immobile until crews spent hours clearing them. Over the following weeks of fighting around Arracourt, these patterns repeated. German tanks with superior guns and armor were defeated by American tanks with superior coordination, superior logistics, and superior tactical flexibility. The Americans lost approximately 30 tanks in the fighting. The Germans lost over 200. The exchange ratio was nearly 7-1 in favor of the Americans. One particularly successful Sherman tank became one of the most effective in the European theater. The crew destroyed dozens of German armored vehicles through the fighting in France and into Germany. Their success came not from superior equipment, but from superior crew coordination, aggressive maneuvering, and tactical doctrine that emphasized these strengths. German crews who survived the Arracourt battles returned to their units shocked and demoralized. They had believed their Panthers made them nearly invincible against American armor. They had been taught that the Sherman was inferior, that German quality would overcome American quantity. The reality they encountered shattered these beliefs. A captured German tank commander interrogated by American intelligence officers after Arracourt described the psychological impact. He had commanded Panthers on the Eastern Front, where the tank's superiority over most Soviet armor was clear. Soviet tanks could be engaged and destroyed at ranges where they couldn't effectively return fire. Soviet anti-tank guns required multiple hits to penetrate a Panther's frontal armor. But American tanks fought differently. They didn't charge directly into German guns. They maneuvered. They coordinated. They achieved flank shots with what seemed like effortless precision. And when Panthers were hit in the side, they burned just like any other tank. The invulnerability he had felt on the Eastern Front disappeared. He described watching American Shermans advance under covering fire from other Shermans, artillery, and infantry. When his Panther attempted to engage, American artillery began falling around his position within seconds, called in by tank commanders with radios. When he attempted to withdraw, his Panther threw a track. His crew abandoned the vehicle and escaped on foot. Watching from a distance, as American tanks methodically destroyed every disabled German vehicle they encountered, the psychological shift extended beyond individual crews. German commanders writing reports after Arracourt struggled to explain what had happened. How had supposedly inferior American tanks achieved such overwhelming victories? The reports identified several factors: American numerical superiority, American air superiority that prevented German movement in daylight, fuel shortages that limited German tactical options, mechanical problems with Panthers operating in muddy conditions. But some reports acknowledged a more fundamental problem. American crews were better trained in coordinated tactics. American logistics were superior, keeping more tanks operational. American doctrine emphasized crew efficiency and combined arms coordination rather than individual tank superiority. And the Sherman, while inferior on paper in gunpowder and armor, was actually well suited to the way Americans fought. The German crew member who had stood in his Panther's hatch that September morning, confident in his tank's superiority, now understood what other soldiers had learned throughout history when assumptions collided with reality. Technical superiority meant nothing if you couldn't bring it to bear effectively. The best gun in the world was useless if enemy tanks achieved flank shots before you could engage them. The thickest armor in the world protected nothing as the enemy never attacked from the direction that armor faced. German crews across the Western Front heard about Arracourt. The story spread through tank units. American Shermans were destroying Panthers in numbers that shouldn't be possible. The Americans fought with a level of coordination and tactical sophistication that German crews, for all their training, couldn't match. The Panthers, Germany's answer to Soviet armor, their guarantee of armored superiority, were burning in French fields. The battles around Arracourt in September 1944 marked a turning point in how both German and American forces viewed armored combat on the Western Front. For German tank crews, the psychological damage was as significant as the material losses. The Panther had been their answer to Allied armor, their guarantee of battlefield superiority. Arracourt proved that guarantee was hollow dot in the weeks following the battle. German tank units across France and the Low Countries received replacement Panthers to make up their losses, but they couldn't receive replacement confidence. Crews who had believed in their equipment superiority and understood they were vulnerable. The tactical adjustments they attempted revealed the depth of this psychological shift. Some German commanders began ordering Panthers to fight from static defensive positions, dug in with only their turrets exposed, essentially using them as pillboxes rather than mobile armored vehicles. This negated one of the Panther's key advantages, its mobility, but reflected commander fear that maneuvering would expose vulnerable side armor to American flank attacks. Other units adopted extremely cautious tactics, refusing to advance without infantry support and extensive reconnaissance, slowing operations to a crawl. But caution couldn't solve fundamental problems. The Panther's mechanical reliability continued to plague German operations. Final drive failures, transmission problems, and engine issues meant that German tank units often had less than half their assigned strength operational at any given time. American armored divisions, by contrast, maintained operational readiness rates exceeding 80% through superior logistics and maintenance support. German training of replacement crews deteriorated throughout late 1944 and into 1945 as fuel shortages, limited training time and experienced instructors were pulled to frontline units. New crews arrived at combat units with minimal hours in their tanks, sometimes less than 20 hours of actual driving time. They were expected to face American crews who had trained for hundreds of hours before deployment. The successful American tank commander continued fighting through France and into Germany. His crew's coordination became almost instinctive. His gunner could identify German tank types at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters and knew instantly where to aim for maximum effect. His loader maintained rates of fire that kept the gun in nearly continuous action with engagements. His driver maneuvered the Sherman with precision that made the tank a difficult target while positioning for optimal firing angles. This tank destroyed more German armored vehicles than almost any other Sherman crew in the European theater. The success came from the same factors that had produced victory at Arracourt: coordination, communication, aggressive tactics, and mechanical reliability. The Sherman operated 4 months with minimal mechanical problems, requiring only routine maintenance that crews could perform themselves or that battalion maintenance could handle in hours. The contrast with German experience was stark. Panther crews watched their most experienced commanders killed or captured. They saw their best tanks disabled by mechanical failures that couldn't be repaired in the field. They witnessed American combined arms coordination that seemed impossible to counter. American tanks advancing with infantry support, with artillery on call, with air support overhead, presented multiple threats simultaneously. German after-action reports from late 1944 reveal increasing desperation. Commanders requested more Panthers, but they also requested better logistics, more fuel, more spare parts, more training time for replacement crews. The requests revealed understanding that the problem wasn't just the tank design. The problem was systemic, involving every aspect of how armored forces were trained, supplied, and employed in combat. Some reports acknowledged that American tactical doctrine was superior for the conditions on the Western Front, the emphasis on coordination over individual tank capability, the integration of armor with infantry and artillery, the logistics system that kept tanks operational, all represented advantages that couldn't be countered by superior gun penetration or armor thickness alone. Individual German tank crews faced an impossible situation. They had equipment that was theoretically superior in direct combat, but they operated within a system that couldn't sustain them. American crews had equipment that was adequate rather than superior, but they operated within a system designed to maximize that adequacy through numbers, logistics, coordination, and combined arms integration. The psychological burden on German crews intensified as the war continued. Every engagement risked mechanical failure. Every advance risked being cut off from supply lines that were already stretched thin. Every defensive position risked being outflanked by American units that moved faster and communicated better. The crew members who had mocked the Sherman's gun before Arracourt now understood that gun was adequate when employed by well-trained crews with effective tactics and overwhelming logistical support. The industrial reality behind the fighting in France revealed why German confidence in the Panther had been misplaced from the beginning. Germany's entire tank production in 1944 totaled approximately 8,000 armored vehicles of all types. This included Panthers, Tigers, and various specialized vehicles. The United States produced over 17,000 Sherman tanks in 1944 alone, not counting other armored vehicles. The production disparity extended beyond simple numbers. American factories produced Shermans with interchangeable parts standardized across manufacturers. A transmission failure could be repaired using a transmission from any Sherman of the same variant, regardless of which factory produced it. German factories, by contrast, produced Panthers with variations between production batches that sometimes made parts incompatible. A Panther built by one manufacturer might require different components than a Panther built by another. American logistics delivered spare parts to frontline maintenance units with efficiency that German forces couldn't match. When a Sherman threw a track, replacement track blocks arrived within days or sometimes hours. When a Panther threw a track, replacement blocks might take weeks to arrive, if they arrived at all. German supply lines, under constant attack from Allied air power and stretched across occupied Europe, simply couldn't deliver what frontline units needed. The crew training pipeline showed similar disparities. American Armored Force training centers graduated thousands of trained crews in 1944. These crews had trained 4 months in their tanks, had fired thousands of rounds of ammunition in practice, had maneuvered 400s of miles in training exercises. They arrived at combat units with cohesive crew coordination, already established. German training of replacement crews had collapsed into abbreviated courses that barely familiarized crews with their vehicles. Fuel shortages meant limited driving time. Ammunition shortages meant limited gunnery practice. Many replacement crews arrived at frontline units having never fired their tank's main gun, having driven their tank for only a few hours total. They were expected to face experienced American crews in combat within days of arriving. The American system could absorb losses and continue functioning. When a Sherman was destroyed, the crew members who survived were pulled back to replacement depots, given medical treatment if needed, assigned to new crews, and returned to combat. The institutional knowledge remained in the system. New crews learned from veterans. Tactics evolved based on combat experience that was systematically collected and disseminated through training updates. German tank units, operating at the end of deteriorating supply lines and with collapsing training systems, couldn't replace losses effectively. Experienced crews were irreplaceable. When a veteran Panther commander was killed, his knowledge died with him. Replacement commanders arrived with minimal training and no combat experience. Unit effectiveness degraded with each loss. The successful American crew's effectiveness illustrated how the American system worked. Their coordination, developed through extensive training and refined through combat experience, made them far more effective than the sum of their individual capabilities. The Sherman they operated was mechanically simple enough that field maintenance kept it running. The logistics system delivered fuel and ammunition without interruption. The tactical doctrine they employed emphasized their strengths rather than attempting to match German tanks in areas where German designs were superior. This crew fought through a major German counteroffensive in December 1944 and January 1945, where German forces launched a massive attack using their strategic reserve of armor and infantry. German tank units, including numerous Panthers and heavy tanks, achieved initial surprise and made significant penetrations of American lines. But the offensive stalled and ultimately failed for the same reasons German armor had failed at Arracourt: inadequate logistics, insufficient fuel, mechanical unreliability, and American defensive coordination. American armored units counterattacked German penetrations using the same tactics that had worked in France: coordinated movement, achieve flank shots, maintain mechanical readiness, communicate constantly. German tanks that advanced beyond their supply lines ran out of fuel and were abandoned. Panthers that broke down were left behind as German forces withdrew. The offensive consumed Germany's strategic reserve and accomplished nothing except delaying the inevitable dot. By early 1945, German tank production was collapsing as Allied bombing destroyed factories and raw material shortages became critical. Panther production, which had peaked at over 300 tanks per month in 1944, fell to fewer than 100 per month. Many Panthers produced in the final months of the war outreached combat units, abandoned at factories, or destroyed by Allied air attacks during transport. American Sherman production continued at full capacity. New variants appeared, including improved versions with better suspension and versions mounting more powerful guns that could penetrate Panther frontal armor, reasonable combat ranges. These improvements came from systematic analysis of combat reports and rapid implementation of design modifications. The German crews, who had believed in their Panther's superiority, who had mocked the Sherman's gun, now faced the reality of industrial warfare between modern nations. Individual weapon quality meant nothing when the enemy could produce weapons faster, keep them operational longer, train crews more thoroughly, and coordinate operations more effectively. The Panther was an excellent tank in isolation. In the context of total war, it was a resource drain that Germany couldn't sustain. The successful American tank commander's war ended in late September 1944 near a German town. His Sherman struck a landmine that severely wounded him and killed several crew members. He was evacuated to hospitals and eventually the United States, surviving his injuries, but never returning to combat. His crew's record stood as one of the most successful in American armored history. Approximately 80 German armored vehicles destroyed in less than 4 months of combat. This success wasn't unique. Dozens of other Sherman crews achieved similar results through the same combination of training, tactics, and system-level support. The American armored force as a whole maintained kill ratios against German armor that seemed impossible based on technical specifications. Sherman crews destroyed Panthers and other German tanks at rates exceeding 3 or 4 to 1 in most engagements, sometimes much higher. The lessons learned from Arracourt and subsequent battles fundamentally changed how military theorists understood armored warfare. The naive belief that superior individual weapons guaranteed victory was exposed as fantasy. Modern war was systemic, involving logistics, training, industrial production, tactical doctrine, and combined arms coordination. Excellence in one area couldn't compensate for inadequacy in others. German military analysis after the war acknowledged these truths, though often reluctantly. German crews had been excellent soldiers, fighting with courage and skill in difficult circumstances. Their equipment, particularly the Panther and heavy tanks, represented sophisticated engineering, but they operated within a system that was fundamentally inadequate for the war Germany was fighting. No amount of individual quality could overcome systemic failure. American doctrine that emphasized adequate equipment in large quantities, thoroughly trained crews, robust logistics, and coordinated tactics proved superior to German doctrine emphasizing superior individual weapons. The Sherman wasn't the best tank of World War II by most technical measures, but it was good enough, and there were enough of them, supported by a system that kept them operational and employed them effectively. The irony that German crews mocked the Sherman's gun before discovering that gun was perfectly adequate for defeating Panthers when employed properly became part of the historical lesson. Technical specifications told only part of the story: how weapons were employed, how crews were trained, how logistics sustained operations, how tactics exploited advantages while minimizing vulnerabilities. All mattered as much or more than gun penetration tables and armor thickness measurements. For the German tank crews who survived the war, The memory of watching their Panthers burn in French fields remained vivid. They had believed in their equipment, trusted their training, assumed their technological superiority would guarantee victory. The collision with reality was traumatic, not just physically, but psychologically. Everything they had been taught about armored warfare proved inadequate when facing an enemy with systemic advantages. The Sherman crews, who defeated them, had no illusions about their tanks' limitations. They knew the guns struggled against frontal armor of German heavy tanks. They knew their armor could be penetrated by German guns at long range, but they also knew their training was thorough, their logistics were reliable, their tactics were effective, and their coordination was superior. They fought with the equipment they had, using doctrine that maximized its effectiveness. The battle around Arracourt and the broader pattern it represented demonstrated fundamental truths about industrial warfare. Victory came not from having the best weapons, but from having adequate weapons in sufficient quantities, employed by well-trained personnel, sustained by effective logistics, and coordinated through superior doctrine and communication. Germany had focused on producing superior individual weapons while neglecting the systems required to employ them effectively. The United States had built integrated systems where each component, from factory production to crew training to tactical doctrine, reinforced the others. The German crew member standing in his Panther's hatch that September morning in 1944, confident in his tank's superiority over American Shermans, learned a lesson that countless soldiers throughout history had learned when assumptions collided with reality. Equipment matters, but systems matter more. Individual quality means nothing without systemic support, and the nation that can produce adequate weapons in overwhelming numbers, keep them operational, train crews thoroughly, and coordinate their employment effectively will defeat the nation with superior weapons but inadequate systems. The mockery of the Sherman's gun proved to be mockery of American adequacy, American systems, American industrial capacity. That adequacy, multiplied by overwhelming numbers and supported by superior logistics and tactics, was more than sufficient to defeat German excellence that couldn't be sustained or effectively employed. The gun German crews mock destroyed their Panthers, not through superior penetration, but through superior employment by crews operating within a superior system. That was the truth German crews learned in the fields of France,